So, as you all are aware, for the last year or so, the Pinellas County Sheriff's Office has been working with the Florida Department of Financial Services and the Pinellas County Construction Licensing Board regarding the unlicensed contractors that have been operating in Pinellas County. And it's been a significant issue, and as most are aware, for a period of time last year, we took on not just the criminal investigative responsibilities, but also a lot of the administrative responsibilities as the Pinellas County Construction Licensing Board was transitioning from being an independent entity into an entity under Pinellas County government, which it is now. And they are responsible for doing the administrative side, which is vetting people for licenses, going through the licensing process, and dealing with violations of the requirements of somebody who's licensed. But when it crosses over into people actually going out and acting in an unlicensed capacity and doing unlicensed work, that's criminal, and that transitions over to the Sheriff's Office to conduct those investigations. And again, we're doing that in conjunction with the Licensing Board, but also with the Department of Financial Services, because these people who are engaged in this unlicensed contracting, if not all the time, the absolute majority of the time, they don't have workers' compensation insurance, which is a big hole and a big void, and that's a felony to not have that workers' compensation insurance, because it's important to protect the people that the work is being done for, because if somebody gets hurt on the job, that's where the insurance comes in, that's where the protection comes in. So as we continue to do these operations, the thing that concerns us the most is consumer harm, and that is people who are going out and conducting these jobs, doing this work, and performing it without being licensed, because they're ripping people off. And as people say, well, what's the big deal about these people just trying to make a living? Well, the big deal about it is that they're not just trying to make a living, and even if they were, they should do it the right way and be licensed. But they're not trying to just make a living, they're trying to rip people off. And for many of these people, it's a scam, and we'll run through some of these. But in the last year, and to give you current numbers, in the last year that we've been doing these, and this is the 5th operation that we did over the past weekend. So it began on Saturday, yesterday, and this morning. And as to how prevalent it is, this morning, I'm going to update these numbers that you see on the boards here, is this morning alone is that we arrested 10 people this morning in a 2-hour period. So it's still a problem, and as they say, it's like shooting fish in a barrel, and what we want to see is we want to see it be harder for us to get these people to come. And it's no harder today than it was 5 operations ago. And in fact, we had one who, and I'll show you who she is that this is her second time coming back to one of our operations. So we have arrested in these 5 operations 152 people, a total of 331 charges. And here's a pretty significant number, and they're updated from what you see here on the board, because the numbers I'm giving you with those 152 arrests and 331 charges includes this morning's arrests. And the total value of the work that people offered to do during these 5 operations is about $700,000. And so that's $700,000 of unlicensed work, which in many cases they were going to rip people off for. And also importantly, that's $700,000 worth of work that licensed contractors weren't getting. And the people who are doing it the right way, who are legitimate business people, who go through the process, they get licensed, they abide by the law, are losing out on this business and this work and income from themselves and their companies and their employees, because you got a bunch of people that are doing it illegally and engaged in a bunch of scams. And one example of this, and just shows you the type of people that are engaged in this, is to my right and to your left over there, you see the board of Jason Liggett. Well, Jason Liggett advertised himself out there on Craigslist as the, quote, topless handyman. And he did have a company that was registered with the state of Florida as Shaw's Secret Sauce Company. And as you can see with the verbiage that is there on the board that was posted on his ad about his topless handyman services, there's no accident to the wording that's in there. It doesn't take much to read between the lines as to what he's offering. And he showed up here on Saturday and offered to engage in the services for this undercover operation that we had. He showed up in an Uber. He had nothing with him. He had no tools. He had no equipment. He had nothing other than he showed up and he was given a quote and offered to perform painting and tiling services as this topless handyman. It's a scam, and he undoubtedly would have ripped off a victim as he's engaged in his sauce company with his topless services. And again, I'm not going to get into it because it's rude, but kind of read the verbiage there that's on the board, and you'll see what he's really offering, and it's not construction services. As we look at some of the other people who showed up here for this operation, we in our economic crimes unit have been investigating Stephen Sittler, S-I-T-L-E-R. And Sittler had posted an ad on Craigslist to do work. And there was a couple who owned a piece of property in Feather Sound out off Ulmerton Road. And they contracted with him to do a remodel of the interior of their property. They recently paid him $3,000 to commence the work, and then he was due to have paid to him another $2,800 when he finished it. He didn't do anything. And the victims lived out of town, and they were communicating with him, and somehow he convinced them to pay the $2,800, but he did nothing. So they paid him the total amount, the $3,000 originally, and then the additional $2,800. And he even refused to give them a key back to the residents, and they had to have the locks changed. So he was somebody who was advertising, and he showed up here this past weekend in this operation, and he was arrested again for unlicensed contracting, for the grand theft, for ripping these people off out in Feather Sound. He had been paid over $5,000 and didn't do anything at all. And these people, again, were out of town, and they were having a remodel done of their property. He's also charged with a felony for not having workers' comp insurance. So another one who showed up here over the weekend, and people know this is, I guess in some respects, amazing and mind-boggling, but in others it's not, is 56-year-old Mario Oriana. He came and showed up, and he said to the detectives that, I'm pretty sure you all had cameras in there. I knew better to tell you the truth. I've seen this stuff in the news. And what this reminds me of is it reminds me of doing DUI checkpoints. When we do DUI checkpoints is we put out there where we're going to be, what we're going to be doing, and don't drive drunk and come through the checkpoint. But guess what? They drive drunk and come through the checkpoint. I mean, we could probably put a flag out there and say that we're doing this undercover operation this weekend. These people would still come. It's amazing that they engage in this activity. And this is the 5th time now, and we publicize this, and you all cover it, but they're greedy and they're ripping people off, and they still come. Just a couple of notable cases from previous operations. And again, because I want people to understand that this isn't just people who are, quote, trying to make a living, and why are we picking on these people because they're trying to make a living? Well, go down and get licensed, do it the right way, do it the reputable way, do it the credible way. But majority of these people, if not all of them, are not just that person that's trying to make a living. They have no intention of either doing the work at all, and they have no intention of doing it the right way. From a previous operation, there were 2 people, Howard Ownby, and you can see their pictures are all here on these boards, and Charles Schoon. So they came to do roofing work. And as to the undercover detectives who were doing the operation, these guys didn't even bring a ladder. And as part of the negotiations, they asked the detectives if they would basket toss them onto the roof to do the roofing work. Here's another one. This is classic. Douglas Diershow, D-I-E-R-S-H-O-W. He was arrested, and at the time that he was arrested, he was on probation for, guess what? Unlicensed contracting. And part of the probation for the unlicensed contracting is that he had to pay $32,000 in restitution to the victim. Well, being this scammer and genius that he is, is that, so unlicensed contracting, he's on probation, he's got to pay $32,000 in restitution, as opposed to going out and doing it the right way and getting licensed and getting a real job. He goes out and he gets somebody else who has a license, who's willing to scam with him, and so that he can use that license number. And then he shows up here to the operation and is claiming he's got a license, but it's not his license. It's another unscrupulous guy who has a license, and he's scamming that number. So as opposed to doing it the right way, so to pay the $32,000 in restitution, he's again engaging in unlicensed contracting, but he's using somebody else's number that is unscrupulous as well to again scam to try and make this money so he can pay back his $32,000 in restitution. Sherrod McCluster, he was on federal probation for conspiracy to distribute narcotics when he showed up to do this work. Jason White, he had warrants outstanding for him for failure to secure workers' compensation insurance. This is a guy who would drop off palm fronds in the front yard as if he was going to do the work, and then he'd never come back. Kevin Bluto, who showed up at somebody's house to do this work. He's a registered sexual offender in the state of Florida. Deborah Tierney, she showed up, was clearly under the influence of narcotics. And as she was there, she urinated in her pants. She was so intoxicated. I mean, these are the type of people that are showing up to do this. Hugo Ramos, he had been arrested previously in Hillsborough County for unlicensed contracting. So when we put all this together, and then our second time around in our operations is, she's here now, is Jacina Velasquez. You'll see her right there on the second board over. And remember the operation we did in August down in Lellman, and many of you were there for that, is that Jacina Velasquez was arrested in that operation, and she was arrested again this morning, and she's in the building now. So this is a second time where she's coming back for the same thing. And when you're talking about $700,000 worth of work, it has a significant fiscal impact. And the intangible with this is that's going on out there is not only is the $700,000 in fiscal impact in the community and the legitimate contractors being deprived of that in their businesses, but the fact that these people are doing this without having workers' comp insurance is a big deal. Because if somebody gets hurt on one of these jobs and they're unlicensed and they don't have the requisite workers' comp insurance, somebody's got to pay for it, and that's the public. And one of these victims is going to get sued over it, and it's going to affect their homeowner's insurance. It's going to affect them in other ways financially, because these people represent themselves to have all the right coverages in place, and they don't. So this is a big deal. We will continue to do these operations, and what I really want to see is that they're hard for us to do, but they're not. It is truly shooting fish in a barrel. It's easy. All we do is set it up, they come, we make the phone calls, and in this operation alone this weekend is that we had 39 arrests just this weekend alone. So out of the 152, 39 of them were this weekend. So we'll continue to do these operations, and my message is to people who are out there engaged in this activity: do it the right way, do it the legal way, get licensed, and don't rip people off. Anybody have any questions?
Sure. I'd like to know if something at the state level, an enhancement, some new punishment for these, because like you're saying, it's fish in a barrel, right? So that means it ain't just arresting them's not working. So what more?
Yeah.
What more would you like? What tool in the toolbox would you like?
Right.
That would help you to keep them off the street?
Well, they may have to start looking at these, is right now, for some of them are always misdemeanors. Some, if it's a first time, it's a felony. The second time can be a felony. And if these people aren't getting the message and this continues the way it is, then perhaps we're going to have to ask the legislature to look at this and make some felonies out of it, so that we can start shutting this down, because there is consumer harm. I mean, these people are hurting people, just like the couple I told you about with the Feather Sound condo. Now, in that case, is that guy is going to be charged with grand theft as well, and so that's a felony. But those are harder cases to make, because especially when somebody does work and they do shoddy work and they just don't do it to the right level, then those are harder cases to show the intent in the grand theft. Now in this one, where he just didn't do the work and he took the over $5,000, well, those are easier cases to make. But we really need to be able to charge more of these people, obviously charge them with felonies, because look at the boards, look at all these people, and this is just what we're doing here in Pinellas, and I know other counties have done this as well.
That you think would be a dissuade them perhaps?
Well, you hope the message gets out, and as they start getting, because some of these, like, so as an example, with Jacina here, is that when we checked this morning, is that from the August arrest, is that where she is in the criminal justice system, it's being reviewed and considered for pretrial intervention, which is a form of diversion. So, that didn't, a previous arrest and a diversion program is not dissuading her because there's no skin in it. I mean, it's no big deal. All right, it's the cost of doing business. Remember, we even had people previously that told us in these operations that before we started doing this, before the sheriff's office in the last year started doing these operations and criminally charging these people, the only thing the licensing board was doing was dealing with it administratively, and that they would issue fines to them. And they flat out told us that was just the cost of doing business. And they built that into their rates they were charging because they knew that they were going to get fined for it, but well, what's a fine? Who cares? So that's kind of the mindset of these people, and until it costs them something, if you will, and they got some skin in it to some significant degree, they're just going to keep doing it.
Another quick question. You said, I just want to quote, you can see what he's really offering, and it's not construction services. Was he arrested for some sort of...
No, but look
I
at
just
it.
want to make sure that,
Yeah.
was there like prostitution or
No,
something?
but it certainly looks like it to me. I mean, he's doing his pool boy stuff. I mean, look at the language. It's all salty language that's in there. Look at it.
Not that I encourage it, but there are women or whatever that will clean your house now, or whatever it might be. I just want to know whether or not he was doing work or whether this was like prostitution.
Well, I mean, like I said, I don't think that there's indications that there was more to it than that, but that didn't happen here. So we did not charge him with anything along those lines. But with what he's offering in his, quote, sauce company and the toplessness and the language and, the stuff that's in there, it's, again, you don't have to read too much between the lines to see what he's talking about in there.
And Sheriff, I know we always ask this, the people that are going out after contractors that need a contractor, what are some ABC simple things that they can do to make sure that they don't get these people?
Well, call and make sure that the people are licensed. Don't take their word for it. Check with the licensing board and make sure that they are licensed. Ask for a license number and then verify it. And also say to the people out there, if the deal sounds too good to be true, it probably is. And these people that are coming and negotiating, remember in the past, and I've showed you some of these in the past where they take the agreement and it's written on a piece of scrap paper, it's written on a McDonald's napkin, and there's no contract, there's no formality, and they negotiate it. And in fact, we've even had some people say, well, I'm not licensed, so here's the lower rate. So again, when the deal sounds too good to be true, it probably is. And this is absolutely a case of trust to a degree, but verify to a higher degree, and make sure that you know who you're dealing with, and check them out before you engage people to do these services. And by all means, use common sense. When somebody's asking for a down payment, okay, why are they asking for a down payment, especially a significant down payment? And if you give them a down payment, don't pay them for the whole job without verifying that the job's been done. So there's a degree of common sense that people can apply to this to help protect themselves as well. And when it doesn't feel right, doesn't sound right, it's not right, and listen to your instincts on it.
Because most legit contractors are not going to be asking for a down payment.
No, and not for small amounts like this. I mean, you're talking about, because these aren't individually, huge amounts. Now, some of them, get in the tens of thousands. It depends upon the work that's being done. But not for a lot of this, they're not going to. And if somebody does, and if you're asking for painting to be done, you're asking for, some electrical services to be done, you're asking for, again, drywall and some of these. If somebody can't, as a business owner, afford to go out and buy the drywall or buy the cans of paint, I think that's a clue that there's a little bit of a problem there, and it's something that should raise flags for people and red flags for people and say, this isn't right. There's something wrong here. And then when they either don't have any formality to the agreement at all, and it's all word of mouth, or they take it and they write it on the back of a napkin or a piece of scrap paper, those should be very clear signs to people that this isn't legit. And they show up in an Uber, or they show up on the back of a motorcycle, or they show up, with somebody driving them in a car. There's no signs on anything, and and we're getting these ads that are being posted on Craigslist, a variety of social media platforms, including Facebook. So, when people are putting out there on Facebook advertising, you're responding to a Facebook ad, and you have somebody come over, like although his was on Craigslist, the topless guy, and he's advertising himself as the topless handyman, with that. I think there's enough there to be leery about. But, this is also one of those things where there's a big problem with the number of people who are doing it. But the reason why they're doing it is because people are paying them and engaging. And then, they come to us and say, I got ripped off. Well, no kidding. It doesn't look right, doesn't feel right, it's not right. So they can help themselves at the same time and help us. Because if people weren't paying these people and weren't engaging them, it would shut this down too, or help to shut it down. Anybody have any other questions? Anything else you want to know?